Today, we're going to dig into the secret social life of money, why we give it away, why we trust others with it, and what it all reveals about our deepest human connections. Okay, so let's just jump right in with a question. Something I think we've all felt. Why is it that we feel this powerful, unspoken obligation to return a favor? It's not just about being polite, right? It's something way more fundamental about how we connect, and it's something anthropologists have been trying to decode for a long, long time. And that brings us to our first section, the rules of giving. Now, this isn't just about birthday presents or loaning a friend 20 bucks. We're about to unpack the social glue of exchange itself, these unwritten rules that basically hold our societies together. Now, anthropologists have broken this whole thing down into a really handy toolkit of three core ideas: generalized, balanced, and negative reciprocity. You can think of these as like the three basic settings for pretty much all human exchange. So let's start with the one we probably all know best, generalized reciprocity. This is basically giving without keeping score. It's the currency of our closest relationships, our family, our tightest-knit communities. You don't send your parents an invoice after you help them move, do you? Of course not. That's because the exchange is so constant that trying to tally it up would actually ruin the relationship. Okay, next up we have balanced reciprocity. Now here, there is an expectation. It's a bit more formal, a trade between people who know each other but maybe aren't in that super close inner circle. A gift is given, it has to be received, and then something of pretty much equal value is expected back in a reasonable amount of time. Think about holiday gift exchanges at work. If you get someone a really thoughtful gift and they give you back a $5 gift card, yeah, that social link gets a little shaky real fast. And finally, there's negative reciprocity. This is the most impersonal and, honestly, the most adversarial kind of exchange. It's the attempt to get something for nothing. Both sides are trying to maximize their own gain, usually at the other person's expense. And this almost always happens between strangers, where trust is super low and self-interest is super high. You want to know perfect modern-day example? The Nigerian 419 email scam. It's an absolute masterclass in negative reciprocity that's disguised to look like balanced reciprocity. It dangles this huge reward for just a little assistance fee. Hey, 20% of millions. But the real goal, of course, is to get something for absolutely nothing. It plays on our natural instincts for a fair exchange, but it's all about taking, not giving. So these rules, they feel kind of intuitive, right? But can we actually measure them? Can we put something as fuzzy as trust under a microscope? Well, that brings us to our next section. Can we measure trust? So to do this, economists use these really clever experiments like the ones in this South African study. First, you've got the dictator game. Player 1 just decides how much money to give to player 2. That's it. It's a pure measure of altruism. But then the trust game adds a brilliant twist. Whatever money the first player sends gets tripled. Then the second player decides how much, if any, to send back. This design is so smart because it measures not just altruism, but the expectation of getting something back. In other words, it measures trust. And listen, this wasn't just for pocket change. The study took place across 14 different communities in South Africa, and the average amount of money involved was equal to about 2 days' wages. So these were real meaningful decisions for the people playing this game. So what was the result? Well, it was pretty incredible. On average, the first players, the trusters, sent over half their money, 53%, to a complete stranger in their community. They were betting that it would be tripled and that the other person would be good enough to send some of it back. That number, that's just a stunning, measurable sign of the baseline level of trust. But that leads us to a really fascinating and maybe a little uncomfortable question. What happens when money isn't just a token in an experiment, but a massive, real part of someone's life? This brings us to Section 3, the paradox of wealth. Does having more money actually make us less generous? Well, researchers have found some pretty startling stuff. Nick Pauve studied lottery winners and found that getting a huge, sudden windfall of cash tended to make people lean more to the political right and be less supportive of things like wealth redistribution. His takeaway is, well, it's a little chilling. Humans are creatures of flexible ethics. And this creates a huge problem for society, which Dr. Rosalind Warner sums up perfectly. She says, the paradox is that the wealthy must be on board the project of contributing to the social good at the very point when they are the least motivated to do so. So the very people who have the most resources to help solve big problems might, because of that wealth, be the least psychologically inclined to actually share them. Which leaves us with this huge question, right? Why would wealthy people choose to opt out of a social system that really benefits everyone, including themselves? Is it just simple self-interest, or is it something deeper? Maybe a psychological need for control that all that money gives them? But hold on, is this paradox a universal human law? Turns out, not necessarily. Let's move to our final section, community as capital, and take a look at a place where the rules seem to work completely differently. Pemba, in Zanzibar. Now, to understand what's going on in Pemba, we need a new way of looking at things, a lens that splits wealth into two different kinds. First, you've got material wealth. That's what we usually think of. Money, land, possessions, all that stuff. But then there's relational wealth. And that's the value you get from your social network, your friends, your family, your coworkers. It's your safety net of human connection. Okay, so life in Pemba revolves around farming cloves. It's a cash crop that can bring in these massive but wildly unpredictable windfalls of money. So one year you might be rolling in it, and the next you've got nothing. And that uncertainty makes your social network, your relational wealth, the single most important insurance policy you have. Here, sharing food isn't just a nice thing to do. It's a fundamental part of work, of friendship, and literally of survival. So after everything we just talked about with the wealth paradox, what would you expect to find here? That the richest families would be the most isolated, right? Nope. Completely wrong. The mind-blowing finding from the study in Pemba is that the materially wealthiest households actually have the most social connections, not the fewest. They totally flip the paradox on its head. So how on earth do they do it? Well, it boils down to a few key things. First, there are deep cultural and religious duties that say if you're wealthy, you are expected to share more food, period. Second, they actively strengthen those social connections by hiring poorer members of the community, creating these relationships that are good for everyone. And crucially, there's no wealth homophily. You know that thing where rich people only hang out with other rich people? In Pemba, wealth is used to build a bigger, stronger community network, not to escape from it. So what this all really comes down to is a really powerful idea. Money doesn't have to push us apart. A place like Pemba shows us that wealth can actually be used to weave a stronger social safety net, not to cut ourselves off from it. Every single exchange, whether it's a simple gift or a big community meal, is just another thread in that social fabric. And that leaves us with one final question to chew on, one that I think applies to every single one of us. In your world, in your community, what's the better, safer investment? Building up more material capital or investing in your social capital? The answer might not be as simple as we think.